Can you imagine if after a crazy year where they do well, can you imagine if WWE does that? Can you imagine if there was video of him smelling his hand after that most recent one on LeBron? Can you imagine if, how it went? Can you imagine, because there's always celebrities at the Olympics, can you imagine if, like, surviving members of Queen, like, can you imagine if they unearthed some weird footage? Can you imagine if I shook hands with Gravy and I took one of my fingers and scraped the inside of his palm? Can you imagine the hangover after you've been that drunk? Can you imagine now if there was a massive war? Can you imagine if you had a son who did what this kid did? Can you imagine if you're some, 13-year-old kid? Can you imagine if he turns into, Marv Marinovich? He's just freaking out. Can you imagine if in that game and there was, 20 people pile on the ball, and because there's active diarrhea, he's sitting there and he's going, and one of you guys poop your pants? Can you imagine being at Kobo and Bob Seger says, too damn cute to be a minute over 13? Can you imagine if you're all pissed off, bitter from a divorce, and you actually made a bass guitar out of one of her legs? They're probably like, well, we don't care about the win. We're just happy that we didn't have a guy explode on us when can you imagine if he tackle him? Like, oh, God. Can you imagine? 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 Can you imagine if you had